Hi, everyone, this is the movie breakdown of Spiderhead, so spoiler warning. The movie takes place in a state prison, and inmates are experimented with the effects of chemical compounds. The test subjects have volunteered for the project, aiming to reduce their prison sentence time. The building's appearance, which resembles a spider's head sticking out of a cliff hole, gave the name Spiderhead. Together with his assistant Mark, Steve Abnesti administers the facility. Steve is the owner of a pharmaceutical business that develops a range of medications that alter behavior. The prison also serves as a research facility in the not-too-distant future. All of the prisoners in Spiderhead are serving lengthy prison sentences for their crime. To an atypical prison inmate, the volunteers at the Spiderhead research facility have far better living conditions, excellent food, and a quiet environment. The story starts with Greg, who is laughing so hard that he almost faints. This man has been identified as a convicted felon who has served 4 stints in jail. He was shown some of the biggest catastrophes in the world, but all he could do was laugh. Next scene shows Steve coming back to the facility from his private plane. Jeff, another inmate, wakes up and he's taken somewhere with a blindfold on his eyes. He is accompanied by armed guards and Steve observing his every behavior. After that, Jeff gets back in the facility and we see him talking to a female prisoner named Liz. It is revealed that both of them have different sentences. Jeff has flashbacks of the previous trip where he is looking at the world in some very weird way, as he was influenced by administered substance. He looks at simple things like a factory and he sees it as a beautiful place. He recalls a memory when he used to live a simple life and enjoy parties with his girlfriend. When one day he was driving the car so fast that he got an incident. The next day Jeff is sitting for an interview. Shortly a woman named Heather arrives and sits in front of him. Some questions are being asked to them by Steve. Jeff rated the women about 8 in her attractiveness score. However, Heather only gave him less than 5. Suddenly they both started to feel something intense for each other. Looked like the substance they were given was working for them. They immediately have sex with each other intensely, which lasted quite a while. Eventually, the effects of the substance wears off and they are back to normal. Steve wants to see if the love really lasts even after the effects wears off. All they have to do is to take a closer look at them if they still feel the same way toward each other. During lunchtime, Jeff and Heather see each other, but he does not seem interested in her. Next day, an older woman named Sarah sitting with Jeff in the same interview room. They both acknowledged for the process to begin. Then later, we can see Mark refilling his substances. He also suggests him to not let others touch his back, and same applies for him. Next session, while an experiment is going on, Jeff sits in with Steve at the control room, who asks him if he should give Darkenflox to one of the women he had sex with earlier. He neither chooses from Heather nor Sarah. The substance is revealed to be N40, which Steve claims could change the world. The effect will make people to feel love. Before Jeff walks away, Steve comes back to him and asks what he really wanted. Jeff once again had a flashback of the accident where his friend died on the spot. He wanted to go back and fix it if he had one wish. Later we can see all the people eating, playing games and having fun. Jeff is called by the guards and so he can make a phone call, which Het gets a voicemail from someone he knew. His father on the line says this is his last voicemail ever. Later he celebrates an early Christmas with his Lizzie. The next interview session had Jeff sitting with a big man. They were just sitting face to face, not doing anything for a while. On another sit-in with Steve, Jeff realized that Heather is being asked the same question that he was asked previously. He got angry about it, began an argument with Steve, which resulted in the scientists reminding him how great their life is as compared to prisons. Jeff apologized to him and agreed with the process. At night Steve is dancing around and looking shocked. He took the full dose of N40 drug himself. He later explains to Lizzie on her interview about this dark and flocked substance, which is worse than being on fire itself. Steve tells his assistant Mark to inject him the double dose of one of the substances. Mark hesitantly told him to be careful of high dosage. Suddenly Jeff arrives, which annoyed Steve. currently sitting in again, Steve asking Jeff if he wanted to let them give Heather Darkenflox, and he says he doesn't feel anything for her. So they release little bit of the drugs to Heather. She started going crazy in some internal emotional torment, as if she was going through some kind of withdrawal. As Steve increases the dosage, Heather hits her back to the wall. This results in her killing herself in the process, to which shockingly witnessed by Jeff as Steve runs into the interview room. Jeff quickly takes advantage of it and look at Steve's book. He finds out this whole firm is owned by Steve and he is experimenting all types of drugs one by one. He was going to test several of them so Steve's pharmaceutical can release them. Jeff was able to put back the book in time before Steve arrives back. Steve instructed to clean up Heather's death and not to tell anyone about it, otherwise the government is going to shut the facility. As Jeff was upset about the incident, Steve explained to him how they were doing all this for humanity. Later on, they drink together, and both laughing about their funny experiences. They were both administered the laughing substance. Next day, Darkenflox was given to Lizzie as well, which made her scared of a stapler. Steve seemed to be enjoying this session as he knows Jeff and Lizzie are becoming closer to each other. Another Jeff's flashback revealed that there's another person inside the car, her girlfriend is sitting at the back, which reveals that actually killed 2 people while he was drunk driving. Lizzie witnessed him and could feel his pain, as she hugs him in the end kiss him. Jeff seems to be falling in love with her. Steve is taking a closer look at this development and give himself big dose of love substance. On the next sit-in session, Steve reveals to Jeff that Darkenflox is going to be given to Lizzie Ogden today. Jeff immediately says no. That prompts Steve to get angry, as he tells Jeff to come back in the morning to start fresh. Later, when Mark is doing a refill on him, Jeff locks the door and asks about the red substance given to all of them. Mark reveals all the truth he knew about Steve. The only thing Steve cared about was one drug called V6, the red one. Next morning, Steve getting ready for Jeff to decide whether to give Liz Darkenflox or not. He gives the control to Jeff so that he can release Lizzie the substance himself. Jeff refuses it, which makes Steve lash out about it. Lizzie finally revealed that he lied to Jeff about her past. She didn't rob a bank, her baby died inside her own car long ago for her negligence. She went for work for 3 hours and left her baby inside the car, which resulted in her baby's death. Hearing this, Jeff released the substance, but revealed that he released it in Steve's. Mark secretly changed his chemicals with Darkenflox, which makes him felt tons of pain. The substance name would have been called OBS, suggesting obedience. Jeff tried to control him to open the front door, but Steve has a knife in his hands. The fight ensues, as Steve releases all vials of Darkenflox into Lizzie. As Lizzie is about to take her own life, Jeff frees himself from Steve, breaks his vial system and saves Lizzie from her death. He tells her that he loves her as they run. Steve announced to all inmates on intercom to go after Jeff and Liz. As Steve himself tried to fix his vial system, all the inmates are chasing after Jess and Liz. Steve fled from the scene as he ride on his plane. While flying, Steve feels all of the substances. He feels happy, sad and terrible all at the same time. Finally, the love potion shows its effects, and Steve could not look away from the beautiful view of the mountain as his plane crashes into it. Jeff and Liz, escaping from the island through the boat they stole and laughed about it. The problem is clearly shown at the conclusion of the movie. Heather commits suicide in order to escape her suffering and depressive thoughts, when a drug administration device malfunctions and administers too much Darkenflox. In his hurry to reach Heather, Steve drops his keys, giving Jeff the opportunity to read over his notes and discover that Steve had been deceiving him. It was always Steve's decision to decide whether to administer Darkenflox, notwithstanding his claims that he needed to consult his supervisor and a committee. Mark is subsequently questioned by Jeff on why he is assisting Steve with such ethically superior research. Jeff discovers at this point that Steve just cares about B6. Steve doesn't give a damn despite Mark suggesting ways to make money off some of the other medications. Because he lacks perspective and is just interested in the massive money that a flawless B6 would provide. Mark, who was already apprehensive, is persuaded by Jeff to report Spiderhead's crimes to the police, which he did the following morning. Steve learns that Jeff is genuinely in love with Lizzie after he refuses to give Darkinflux to Heather or Sarah even though having sex with both of them. Jeff is then coerced by Steve into giving Lizzie Darkinflux. Jeff is able to turn the tables on Steve though, with a little assistance from Mark giving him Darkinflux rather than Lizzie, thus compromising his control of the facility and escaping with Lizzie. Steve attempts to send the other prisoners after them, reminding them that they would lose their relatively comfortable life at Spiderhead unless they apprehended Jeff and Liz. Examining the conclusion in further detail. Despite being aware of the horrific side effects of Darkinflux, Lizzie asked Jeff to give it to her anyhow since she believed she deserved it for killing her own kid. In a manner similar to how Jeff persisted in using drugs, both positive and negative ones, because he believed he deserved to be punished for killing his friend and girlfriend, especially in children. Trauma can easily result in this kind of reaction. Steve's father abandoned him when he was just 8 years old, which is the main cause of his sense of urgency to get big success. True love was the only thing standing between B6 and perfection. Because he loved Lizzie, Jeff declined to give her the Darkinflux. Jeff gave Steve the B6 and urged him to essentially stop his experimentation at Spiderhead, but Steve refused to do as he was told. This is due to the fact that his research is his true love and that it was all he had in life, which allowed him to counteract B6's effects. In other words, B6 won't work if someone is passionate enough. Steve was attempting to address that by letting Jeff decide who would receive Darkinflux. Although Steve was aware that Darkinflux was a bad drug, he continued to use Jeff because Steve required Jeff to do something against his will, in order to fully test the boundaries of B6. However, in the end, the love drug finally works as the device on Steve's is destroyed during the struggle with Jeff, which results in N40 being released. And along with other substances, he could not fathom that he was about to crash into the mountain since it was so breathtakingly beautiful to him. Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe, like and click the notification bell so you don't miss any new videos. Also, watch for the next movie recap.